4:30 a.m., January 9th, 2026. The outskirts of Lviv shudder. Russia has just launched an Oreshnik, a hypersonic weapon worth tens of millions of dollars. Moscow boasts that this weapon is impossible to intercept. In the Kremlin's view, this was a clear message intended to intimidate Western Europe. It was proof that Russia remains powerful, even after losing a precious Oreshnik battery in Belarus just 4 days earlier. But Moscow is about to learn a brutally expensive lesson. Before the dust has even settled over Lviv, Ukraine strikes back. 2 F-16 Vipers punch a corridor through the sky. They lead a storm shadow attack that no one in Moscow saw coming. To understand this, one must look at the current mindset in Moscow. To them, the Oreshnik is the Ferrari of the missile world. It is flashy, expensive, and something they love to brag about. But here's the catch. When you are buried under heavy sanctions, your high-end garage starts looking empty. Just 4 days earlier, on January 5th, Ukraine managed to compromise an entire Oreshnik battery stationed in Belarus.
Charred remnants tell a story of
10 launchers and billions of dollars in hardware were turned into a localized thermal event before the crews could finish their morning coffee. The Kremlin was feeling the heat. They were desperate for a demonstration of capability. They needed to look like a superpower again before any talk of a ceasefire hit the table. So, they gathered their dwindling stockpile for one massive, expensive warning shot. On the night of January 8th, they initiated a large-scale engagement. 2,042 drones, 36 traditional missiles, and the centerpiece, the hypersonic Oreshnik. The target was Lviv, a city sitting just 40 miles from the NATO border. It was not just an infrastructure engagement, it was a loud, high-stakes signal sent directly to the west. On paper, the Oreshnik is a beast. Mach 10 velocity, 6 MIRV warheads, and the claim of being completely unprecedented. However, the actual impact told a different story. All that high-tech noise only managed to trigger a few automated gas safety sensors and cause minor structural damage to the local grid. It was a multi-million-dollar firecracker that barely scratched the paint, but while the Russian commanders were busy patting themselves on the back, they missed the most important detail. Ukraine was not hiding. They were already initiating a counter-engagement that would make Moscow's strike look like a minor accounting error. By 11:30 p.m., while the smoke was still rising in Lviv, the Ukrainian command did not reach for a phone to complain. They reached for the launch codes. This was a high-speed counterstrike, using a strategy the SBU calls Silent Shadow Decoy. It is a masterclass in making your opponent look like they have more money than sense. Picture the scene. Minus 15 degrees Celsius. The Russian operators inside their Pantsir S-1 vehicles are shivering, their breath fogging up the glass. Then, the silence of the frozen night is shattered. From the Ukrainian side, 15 LUT drones roar to life. These are carbon fiber flying lawnmowers with one mission: to be as loud and annoying as possible on Russian radar. They drop down to 150 feet, skimming the icy power lines across the border. Inside the Russian command vehicle, the green radar sweep suddenly turns into a frantic, strobing red. The operator is not thinking about strategy, he's thinking about the consequences of failure. He slams the safety cover off the launch button. The Pantsir's hydraulic turret slews 90 degrees in a fraction of a second. The dual 30mm cannons point into the black sky and fire. The darkness is ripped apart by a white-hot flash. A $2 million interceptor missile screams off the rail, trailing orange fire across the snow-covered fields. It accelerates to Mach 2 to chase a drone that costs less than the missile's own guidance chip. Then, the impact. A massive fireball erupts in the sky. To the Russian operator, it is a beautiful sight. He sees the target destroyed message and believes he has saved the motherland. He watches the flaming debris fall like burning confetti into the woods. In the Russian bunkers, they are cheering. But back in Kyiv, the mission commanders are checking their watches and smiling. Every time a Russian Pantsir fires, its tubes go empty. It takes 45 minutes of frantic, finger-freezing labor to reload those tubes. As the Russians celebrate their victory over the decoys, their radar screens are starting to ghost. The systems are overloaded, trying to process 10 different targets at once. The eye of the Russian defense is blinking, blinded by its own apparent success. And that is exactly when the trapdoor opens. The bouncer has just emptied his gun at a shadow, not noticing the real heavyweight is already behind him. Just when the Russian crews were lighting victory cigars, the big beasts entered the chat. Two F-16 Block 70/72 Vipers were loitering just inside Ukrainian airspace, ready to turn a victory into a strategic nightmare. This is a wild Weasel mission, and it is as high drama as it gets. Up north near the Belgorod sector, the first F-16 pilot, call sign Wild Weasel, releases the MAL-DJ. Think of the MAL-DJ as a high-tech prank call. It is a small decoy that can mimic the radar signature of a whole squadron of B-52 bombers. Inside the Russian Pantsir vehicle, the operator's heart nearly stops. 1 second he is laughing at drones, the next, his screen shows a massive formation of heavy American bombers. The Russian operator slams his palm onto the launch button. He launches every single SAM he has, firing millions of dollars into the clouds at ghosts. But while he is busy reloading in the freezing mud, the F-16 pilot smiles. He has been waiting for that Russian radar to scream. The moment the Pantsir locks onto the decoys, the F-16 lets loose the AGM-88 Harm. This missile is a radar-hunting shark. It smells the Russian radar frequency and rides that beam right down the operator's throat. Inside the cockpit, the pilot feels the aircraft buck as he pulls a 9G turn to evade returning fire. The Harm impacts. It does not just hit the Pantsir, it neutralizes the radar array, turning that multi-million-dollar shield into a blind hunk of metal. The Russian operator, now totally blind, resorts to his 30mm cannons. He fires blindly into the sky, creating a wall of lead in a scene of total desperation. Meanwhile, to the south, near OL, F-16 Sniper South is pulling the exact same trick. Two ghost squadrons appear simultaneously from different directions. The Russian High Command is having a collective meltdown. They think they are facing a large-scale engagement from the entire NATO playbook. Their systems are at 100% capacity. They are overwhelmed and out of ammo. The F-16 cockpit display flashes. T-minus 60 seconds. The pilot has done his job. He has kicked the door open and broken the bouncer's glasses. Through that open door, the storm shadows are already skimming the ground at 500 knots. Their infrared eyes are locked onto the heart of Russia's energy grid. But do not think for a second that the Russian crews just gave up. When their high-tech radar screens went dark, they went old school. Russian commanders screamed the order. Manual mode. Switch to optical. Since the Harm missiles had blinded their radar eyes, the crews stopped trusting the computers. They switched to electro-optical tracking, essentially a high-powered thermal camera and a manual joystick. On the outskirts of Belgorod, a Russian operator locks his thermal sight onto a flickering shape. He does not wait for a computer lock. He grabs the manual triggers and fires everything. Thousands of rounds of high-explosive tracer fire pump into the air at 2,000 rounds per minute. It looks like a laser light show, where every fifth light is a projectile moving at twice the speed of sound. For a moment, it looks like it is working. One of the LUT decoys is caught in a burst of fire and disintegrates into an orange fireball. The Russian bunkers erupt in cheers again. To them, the sky looks clear. They have neutralized the threats they can see. But here is the reality check that Moscow missed. While they were high-fiving over ghosts, they had ignored the most dangerous player on the board. The real muscle was moving in behind the F-16s. Ukraine used two separate flights of Su-24 fencers, the heavy-lifting veterans of their fleet. These aircraft did not even need to cross the border. They stayed 250 miles back in friendly skies. When you are carrying a Storm Shadow, you do not need to get close to the fire to start a blaze. With a heavy clunk, the Storm Shadows and Scalps detach from their pylons. These are $2 million silent shadows with a grudge. On the ground, the Russian defense was a total mess. One Russian operator finally managed to reboot his system and saw a real contact moving at 500 knots. He fired a wall of 30mm lead, but it was like trying to catch a ghost with a butterfly net. The Storm Shadow is a stealthy predator that sees the target just like a human eye. It ghosted right through the lead and wove through the industrial landscape of Orel. The missile's brain compares the heat signature of the facility against its digital library with incredible speed. By the time the gunner processes the shape, the missile has already banked around a grain elevator. The Storm Shadow performed a surgical audit of the boiler house. Its two-stage warhead punched through reinforced concrete like wet cardboard. Then the Monroe effect kicked in, injecting a jet of plasma directly into the turbine's heart. It did not blow up the entire neighborhood. It perfectly compromised the technical core. The entire plant just stopped. But the real mic drop was Belgorod. While Russian commanders were still confused, 2 more Storm Shadows impacted the Luch power plant and the Stary Oskol substation. The result was an extensive disruption of the entire regional load. In a heartbeat, the Belgorod energy hub, the nervous system of the region, experienced total systemic failure. We are talking about a complete blackout of the primary distribution sector. Back in the Russian bunkers, the screens finally cleared. The operators thought they had won, but then the heaters died and the monitors went black. They had protected the sky against decoys while the real punch had already landed. Russia spent tens of millions to scratch some paint on Lviv. Ukraine used precision to freeze an entire regional hub. The physical impact on those power plants was just the opening act. When a major energy hub goes dark at minus 15 degrees, you are witnessing the systemic collapse of the Russian rear. Moscow cannot just order the parts to fix this due to sanctions. It is a permanent structural compromise that will take months, if not years, to restore. The myth of the impenetrable air defense was outsmarted by a surgical backdoor play. This engagement forces Moscow into a choice. Do they keep their limited S-400 and Pantsir systems at the front, or pull them back to protect their freezing infrastructure? The lesson is clear. Do not spend millions on a flashy Ferrari missile if you have not secured your own backyard. Russia tried to demonstrate strength, but Ukraine demonstrated precision and intelligence. If you support the smart underdog changing the rules of the game, hit the like button. And for the tech geeks, if you were the commander, which sector would you have suppressed first? Let us know your tactical reasoning in the comments. Make sure to subscribe for our next deep dive into the math of modern war. Bye for now.